Hi, students. I just want to talk to you a little bit about your Essay 4, which we're starting this week in our class. Essay 4 is a research paper, and the research paper is going to be on a social issue related to the literature we've read this semester. So we've been exploring things like um, racism and issues related to labor unions and sexism and abuse and um, kind of using lust in immoral ways. And then yeah, so just a number of the works we've read this semester have had to were connected in some ways to a social issue. So what you're going to do with your research paper is you're going to now turn to um, sort of social science research on these social issues and other kinds of research and data on these social issues, and think about what the data says on that social issue, how that might relate to the way a piece of literature explored that issue. And I know that seems really abstract right now, and it is. But part of that is because I want to give you a lot of leeway to research an issue and then figure out sort of the connections you see and then present those connections in an essay. So I know it's hard to not have me showing you sort of exactly how to organize this paper, exactly how to write your thesis this week. But this first week of doing your research, your focus is going to be on simply learning, figuring out a topic that's compelling and interesting to you, and then reading about it, and then figuring out how to draw connections between that topic and one of the literary works we've read this semester. So hang in there. At every step in this process, I'm going to help you. And you can always come sit with me on Zoom and show me what you have and freak out and ask a lot of questions, and I will be here to help you. So take a deep breath, try not to worry too much. Like all big projects for school, I think the secret to working through your research paper is to try not to think of the whole thing at once, but just think of the next little baby step you have to take to get it done. And I break up the assignment into baby steps over the next 3 weeks. So if you just focus on the next step you have to do and focus on doing that step really well, then step by step, you'll get through it and you'll have a strong paper. So you're going to research a social issue related to the literature we've read this semester. You're required to do outside research, which should include at a minimum at least 6 outside sources, which you find through the GCC library. And it should also include a primary source. I did another video going into detail about how and why to use a database and what a primary source is and how to draft a works cited page. Super, super important you watch and really listen to those videos so that you can make sure to do every step correctly so that you get the maximum number of points and so that your paper is strong. Okay. You are welcome to design your own topic based on something that has struck you in the reading, but please run it by me first. But a lot of times students want ideas. And so I made a list of possible topics to just get you thinking. So we read Sweat, which was about people in a labor union and going on strike and losing their jobs. And there are a lot of issues with labor unions in the United States today. There have been a couple really controversial, a piece of some controversial legislation and a controversial Supreme Court decision, the Janus decision. And you might want to research those and think about how they connect to what you witnessed among the characters in Sweat. Another thing related to Sweat that might be interesting, those characters were going through an incredibly hard time. They were losing their jobs. And one of the things that social scientists have been studying a lot in the last several decades is the concept of resilience. It's actually come up a lot during the pandemic. How is it that people keep going, that people find a way to keep going? You might think of Chris and Jason in Sweat. They've gotten out of jail. They're trying to build their lives. You might look at the research on resilience. How is it that some people are able to rebuild their lives and keep going after tragedy and other people struggle? Another thing that comes up in the play is Evan, the parole officer, tells Jason and Chris that shame can be a real obstacle. And he encourages them to kind of face their shame. And you might look at the research on shame. There's a researcher, Brene Brown, who's done some really interesting TED Talks on shame and written some books on it. And that might be an interesting thing to research too. In What the Living Do, a lot of that book is about Marie Howe's brother, John, dying of AIDS. And there are lots of topics you could research here, but one thing that could be really interesting is there was a group called ACT UP that was very vocal when people started dying of AIDS, and ACT UP really felt like homophobia was preventing AIDS patients from getting good treatment. So they did a lot of activism, and they had a huge, powerful effect on AIDS treatment. And so it might be interesting to read about that and learn about that. And I think it's also a really relevant topic to what's going on now in the United States. There's been a lot written in the last year about how more people of color died from COVID, and a lot of people have been asking the question, what role does racism play in healthcare? Are more people of color dying because of discrimination, because maybe doctors aren't taking people of color seriously as they would take, more privilege, or I guess a white person. So is that part of the problem? What does the data show about the ways racism affects healthcare? What steps are being taken to make healthcare more equitable? Is racism a factor in why more people of color are dying from COVID? Many of the works we've read this semester, such as Death Be Not Proud, sort of talk about or explore What the Living Do, explore this idea that maybe death is not something as scary and terrible as we sometimes picture it to be. One social movement that has been really powerfully sharing that perspective is the hospice movement. People in the hospice movement sort of encourage people, if possible, to die at home and to consider sort of the concept of the good death. And a lot of people are choosing now to die at home and to not die in a hospital, and to focus on being comfortable and treating death as kind of a natural event and not something to be avoided at any cost. So that might be an interesting thing to research and write about. This week, we're going to read this awesome essay by Virginia Woolf called What If Shakespeare Had Had a Sister? And it's basically about how women have faced more obstacles than men in many areas, and how that's interfered with their ability to create art. And in the case of that essay, Virginia Woolf is basically asking the question, why is there so little great literature written by women? And she comes to the conclusion that it's because women haven't had access to resources. So one thing you might explore is, to what extent do women still face greater obstacles than men? And that's a big general question, too big for this paper. But you could look at the fight for equal pay for equal work. You could look at the term rape culture and what it means and what evidence exists that is real or not. You could relate the whole idea of rape culture or domestic abuse, um, to His Coy Mistress or My Last Duchess. Um, there are lots of things you could do in exploring the social issue of sexism and how we fight it. So, and you could relate that to several of the works we've read this semester, or just pick one. Um, while this assignment is designed to give you some freedom in the selection of your topic, whatever topic you choose, you should design an essay that in some way explores a social issue raised by a work of literature we've read, and discuss how current research on the issue informs or is informed by the work of literature we read. And I gave you some questions to think about there for that. One thing I do want to say, a lot of students at this stage are like, I don't get it. What's my thesis going to be? Is this going to be an argumentative paper or an informational paper or a compare and contrast paper? And those are absolutely legitimate questions. And my answer is, you're going to shape the kind of paper you want to write after you explore your research topic and after you kind of figure out sort of what you've learned from doing your research. So maybe you explore an issue related to unions. Let's say you explore right to work laws, and you decide right to work laws are terrible, and you want to write an argumentative paper that shows why right to work laws are terrible, and you might even connect it to what happened to the characters in Sweat. And so you might write an argumentative paper. Somebody else might do research on right to work laws, and they might say, well, gosh, it's complicated, and I see good reasons for these laws and good reasons against these laws. And I want to write an essay that kind of explores both sides of the issue and the complexities of it. So that person wouldn't write an argumentative paper. They would write more like an informational paper where they just sort of share the controversy, and their thesis would be about the nature of the controversy. You know, factors that make this a complicated issue are blah, 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 blah. That might be their thesis. And then they would go through all the complexity. So the hard part this week is you want to just get it done, but you really need to take some time to explore your topic and think about it. And then once you've sort of digested your research, which you're going to do by picking out some sources and writing an annotated bibliography, then next week, we're going to work on, okay, now you have all this stuff and you have all this information. How do you turn it into an essay? As with your other essays, you should have an introductory section, a distinct supporting sections, and a conclusion. Remember, a lot of times students write this research paper and they try to write a 5-paragraph essay, which you can't really do with this. I'm forgetting the suggested length of this essay is 6 to 8 pages long, not including the works cited page. So you're going to have, rather than supporting paragraphs, you're going to have supporting sections. So one supporting point, you might write 5 paragraphs about that supporting point. Another supporting point, you might write 3 paragraphs about that point. They don't all have to be the same size, and you should not worry about trying to make each supporting point just 1 paragraph. What I see a lot when students are working on this paper is I get these like 2-page paragraphs. And so in the rough draft conferences, I'm always saying, you got to break this up. This is too long. You know, you can turn this into 5 paragraphs instead of just 1. You will do a works cited page for this essay. I've posted many, or maybe not many, but several videos about how to draft a works cited page, and you have one due on Sunday. It's extremely important that you understand a works cited page is not a list of links. You need to go into the database, find articles, and cite them in correct MLA format. Your draft that is due Sunday doesn't have to be perfect, but if you give me a list of links from the internet and you clearly haven't gone into the database, and you clearly haven't cited your sources in MLA format, you're going to get a 0 on your draft of the works cited page. So make sure that you watch those videos and you understand what you need to do to get credit for that first step. So, as I said at the beginning of this video, I've broken up this assignment into a bunch of baby steps. And if you just keep focusing on the next step, you will end up with a strong paper. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to watch the database video. You're going to go into the GCC library databases and you're going to just wander around. You're not going to worry too much about finding a specific thing. You're going to look at a bunch of sources on a bunch of topics and wait and see until you can find something that looks interesting to you. Then you're going to try to find 6 sources on the topic you want to write about, including 1 primary source. And then you're going to watch the works cited videos and you're going to put those sources into the format of a works cited page, just to practice works cited format so that you're not leaving it to the last minute, so that you're familiar with that format and you demonstrate that you understand it. So that when you actually have your essay done, that step won't be such a big step. You'll have already started on it. Excuse me, I said that the works cited page is due Sunday. It's actually due Wednesday, May 19th. I misread, sorry. Your next step after that is to do an annotated bibliography, which is just a works cited page plus summary of your sources. There will be a video on Canvas that shows you how to do your annotated bibliography. That will be due on Sunday, May 23rd. On Wednesday, May 26th, you're going to give me a tentative outline of your essay and a typed rough draft of your introductory paragraph in the first supporting section of your paper. Notice that each of these little baby steps counts for a percentage of your grade on essay 4. So you can't just show up on June 7th with a finished paper and expect to do really well on it, because 40% of your grade on this paper is due over the next 3 weeks. You get 5% for the works cited page, 5% for the annotated bibliography, 5% each for the outline and the beginning of your rough draft, and 15% for your complete rough draft, which is due on May 30th. Between May 31st and Monday, June 7th, in order to get credit for your rough draft, you must meet with me for 15 minutes, a 15-minute rough draft conference over Zoom, so that I can kind of look through your paper quickly and see if you're on the right track. I'm not going to be able to read all 8 pages word for word, but I'm going to kind of look at the thesis and the topic sentences and the works cited page. And if I, see any red flags, I'm going to say, oh, you got to work on this, so you got to work on that, so that I can be sure and you can be sure that you're going to be able to turn in a really strong paper. The final draft of this essay is due on Monday, June 7th. It should be 6 to 8 pages long, not including the works cited page. And then right here, we have a rubric, just like we do for every other essay. So that's the big picture. I'm here to answer your questions. I know sometimes students hear the words research paper and they just get a knot in their stomach, but try to take a deep breath and just focus on the first thing you have to do, which is start exploring the database, watch the database video, watch the works cited page video, and figure out how to give me a list of sources by next Wednesday. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'm here to help.